It was interesting to hear Corky talk about, the stories and the things that that bring us to where we are now and our understanding of where we are now based on all of those things that happened to get us there. Treading Water was about that. It was about, it is still, you can still read it. Past tense. But the story is, it traced Renata, my fictional version of Renata, which was called Bear Creek, from its earliest beginnings until the High Arrow Keelyside Dam went in. From those very hopeful beginnings when people indeed were faced with a wall of trees and thought they could just kind of go in there and plant apple trees and found out they couldn't, right up until they were, fighting for what they had and what they built and what meant a great deal to them. I was interested at the time of writing this book, in the story of place, and for the book that I'm working on now, I'm interested in the stories that we all accumulate as we go through our lives, our own stories, things that happen to us, and other people's stories that touch us in some way, that we hear about or read about, or as we get to know people, touch us, and that as they build up in our lives, they inform how we see the world and how we move forward. So the book that I'm working on now is about that. But to begin with, I'm going to read a little bit from Treading Water. I'm going to read a passage that I haven't read publicly before. It's quite short. I know this is a storyteller's thing, but I'm a story writer. It's more than one way to skin a cat, and more than one way to tell a story. And I'm a lot happier at a keyboard than I am on a microphone. I'll do my best. So this story takes place in 1921. It's a story of a school teacher who was shell-shocked during the First World War, and so he's dealing with his own trauma. Whenever they're blasting stumps out in the back 40, he's under the desk. And one of his students has also had a trauma happen the previous summer, and as a result has become an angry young man and a bully. And the dynamics between the two eventually lead them to an understanding about themselves. So this is Harold's story. It was on the first really hot day, the cows happily pastured and already congregating under the spreading poplars and little bovine gossip huddles, that Harold hurried through his chores and begged the indulgence of his father to quit early enough for a swim. Permission granted, he jogged over to Frank's place, flicking his too long black hair out of his eyes and feeling the summer heat adhering shirt to skin. Frank was restless, ready to go. His father, in a good mood, grinned at them both, waved them away. Kids should be kids, he thought. Frank was ready to head for the swimming hole, but Harold had more ambitious ideas. We'll take the boat. We'll head down the lake to Baker's Landing where they load the ore for the mountain chief. I want a job, Frank. I don't want to spend my whole goddamn summer pushing cows uphill. The boat was a lovely little Walton with a solid motor. It belonged to Jack Armstrong, who'd bought it in Nelson right from the builders. The Lanark, named after his hometown, was Jack's pride and joy, second only to his horse Ace. But since he married Isabel Gray, the boat had been sitting idle. His new wife was not partial to water. There it sat, pulled up on boards a good distance away from the wharf, under a grove of trees and out of sight of lakeside comings and goings, resting under an oilcloth. He'll never miss it, said Harold, pulling off the tarpaulin. We'll be back in a couple of hours. I just want to ask for a job. Frank, sandy-haired, with a big friendly face, was slow-moving but quick to take a risk most times. Now, he just looked at his friend. Moving an outhouse 6 feet over in the dark was one thing. Taking a boat with 10 years of obnoxious cow-herding, or their very lives of caught, was another thing altogether. We'll pull in, have a swim, come back wet, so it'll look like we were just swimming, grinned Harold. They'll never know. Frank, too, wanted a job at the mountain chief. Neither wanted to return to school, and in these times, a good job was a good excuse. They were 15 years old. They could read, write, do sums. What else did they need? More, they wanted to be freed from home chores and village life. They could make a bundle, send some back home, be their own men. Together, they pulled back the oilcloth, flipped the boat, set the motor resting underneath onto its bracket at the stern. Harold pulled a stiff oilcloth into peaks to approximate the shape of the little boat. He hoped that from a distance it would look as if the boat still rested there. Harold swiped gasoline from his father's shed. The two boys, pants rolled up, pushed the craft along the water's edge until a stand of shoreline trees shielded them more fully from view. They paddled awkwardly until they dared prime the motor and pull the cord. With the wind in their hair and the sparkling lake around, the two felt freedom in their teeth, their eyelashes, the pores of their skin. Saying nothing, they smiled into it, eyes almost shut against the air in their faces. With Harold at the rear, they took a shoreline route, slowly at first, and then, well away from the settlement, headed out into the main lake just to feel the space around them. Frank pushed Harold with his foot. The wind took his words away, so he had to shout 3 or 4 times. "Better steer back to shore, Hal. The Mintos do, and somebody from Bear Creek will see us for sure. There she is now." Harold could see the great swan-like sternwheeler rounding the course of the Narrows. The mountain chief mind was behind her. She had already made that stop. Why hadn't Harold thought about the timing? He hadn't even stopped to consider what day it was. The only thing to do was to head for the shoreline, hide in the shadows, wait for her to pass, and hope they wouldn't be seen. He turned the Lanark sharply, picked up speed, and headed for the shore, panicking. When they hit the deadhead, the boat was at full throttle. It hit port side, skewing the boat's angle as it rose in the air like a duck taking flight. But instead of lifting off, it flipped over in mid-flight, performing an arc, graceful in its deadliness. The bow hit Frank sharply across the temple as he fell into the cold of the lake. They were good swimmers, and they were not far from shore. Harold's first thought was for the boat and for the trouble they would get into if there was damage, for it was certain now they would be discovered. The motor was wet. They would not be motoring quietly back anytime soon. Once his ears cleared, he noticed, as he sputtered on the surface, the silence. Above the distant approach of the Minto, the shoreline birdsong, the lap of disturbed waves, and the final crank of the upturned propeller as the motor flooded with water, the absence of Frank's voice boomed. Harold dove under the boat. He dove again and again, a circle of frantic plunges around the craft, unsure now of where they'd first hit, the deadhead out of sight, the boat drifting. His heart pounded, his ears roared, and when he rose for air, he cried out in panic the name of his best friend. So that's the treading water entry. The book that I'm working on now is called Wind Tales. I just discovered, because I use sort of shorthand when I write notes to myself, that treading water is TW and Wind Tales is WT. I didn't plan that. It's kind of cool. And this is a, I really was looking at people's stories as opposed to stories of a place. So I wanted to choose a place that could be anywhere, that was a way station, a crossroads for people. And so I chose a restaurant at a mountain pass, halfway up the mountain pass, miles from anywhere. And at that restaurant diner, there is a young woman who's there, who stopped there as sort of a way station. She's had her own stuff happening in her life, her own stories have not been so great, and she's looking for direction. Another character in the story is a hitchhiker who has no direction. In fact, his rule of the road is only to hitchhike in the direction of the wind, which tends to make him on a windy day go around circles. And actually that came from a night of storytelling. It was actually my birthday a few years ago when I was sitting at the library lounge. I also work at the Nelson Library, all over the library. And some friends and I were swapping hitchhiking stories. And my one friend, Ross O'Connell, was talking about being in Dublin and meeting a guy who was so relieved to be at this bar in Dublin, at this pub, because he'd been circling the city for 3 days because he would only hitchhike in the direction of the wind. I thought it was fabulous. Free that you would just let the wind take you. So, he's in the story also. We have a waitress looking for direction. We have a hitchhiker who is not looking for direction. We have the owner of the diner, Cass, and the story, the little piece I'm about to read for you is actually Archie's story. Archie's a trucker. He tends to roll through the diner and who in fact picked up Jo the waitress and deposited her there. She was on the side of the road at dusk. It wasn't looking good to him. And kind soul that he was, he took her to Cass's where she gave her a job. Archie has Cass as a long relationship, and he also has a wife elsewhere. And one thing to note that's earlier in this particular chapter, the part that I'm not going to read is he sort of talks a little bit about how he figures they both know about the other, but it's easy to ignore what's not in your face. It's been interesting to me writing, Treading Water was my first book, learning that, if you start writing a story and you put yourself in the shoes of the person you're writing about, that a voice comes out of you sometimes that you didn't know was there, and I guess partly that's a result of the stories we collect almost unconsciously as we go through life, people around us. So this is Archie's voice. out of about 18 points. Okay, here we go. There's drivers know when to push on, drivers know when to stop. Most times I like to pull over away from the crowd where I can get some sleep. I've been known to stop at the diner for a meal, shoot the shit with whoever's around, and head on up the highway 10 miles and find some lonely siding. Makes sense. Reefer trucks, to keep cold, they'll run all night, but the motor cutting in and out will drive you crazy. In the winter, truck's going to run all night to keep the heat up. In the summer, it's the AC, but usually guys will get the cab good and cool, shut her down, and only start her up to wake when they wake up in a sweat. Cattle cars are the worst, smell like shit and make a racket. Get a nice quiet spot, park Betsy on the flat, have a cool drink, conk out. All you can hear are the crickets. There's guys got their pit stops like me, and there's guys who keep a photo of Shirley or Peggy or whoever on the visor at all times. And there's guys who see the roads and mobile cat house. Me, I generally tell those lot lizards I don't need their services, thanks very much, and if they get belligerent, I tell them to take a hike more or less, and I'm not sorry for saying it either. You got to be able to take no. One night I was pulled at a truck stop, a big lot, 7 or 8 rigs pulled up. I'm hauling plywood, running a little ahead of schedule, and feeling pretty good about it. Don't recognize any of the rigs in the lot, but that's okay. You don't always feel like talking. Everyone's in the diner or in their cabs, nobody in the lot. I decided to stay put. It's quiet, and anyways, there's a mountain pass ahead. I know from experience, I mean I have to park either slanted up or slanted down, no good place to stop at the top. It's got to be level or I wake up with my face crushed into the back of the seat because I've rolled with the slope. So yeah, I decided I'd have a bite, stay put a few hours, get 40 minutes on the flat. Diner's all lit up, 1 or 2 guys gulping coffee inside. Overhead there's a million stars. Kind of sentimental about stars. I see the Big Dipper, Orion, Cassiopeia, which always makes me think of Cass. After I wolf a couple of burgers, fries, and a glass of milk, Myra's always after me about the milk. I'm thinking about the Jack Daniels I got in the rig, thinking to listen to what's going on out there on the CV for a while, then hit the sack. But first I have a smoke, look at the stars, and when I pull my head back down, there's this lot lizard going truck to truck, and of course I know what she's doing. I watch it for a bit, but there don't seem to be any takers at first to, and I'm at the end of the road pretty much. I'd rather she wasn't climbing up onto my cab with me not inside, so I head back a bit ahead of her. When she gets to my rig, I'm just butting up my cigarette, ready to call it a night. She's about 40 and looks like something the cat dragged in. Dark red nails bitten down, mascara running into the bags under her eyes, little sized bruises all over her neck, wearing a t-shirt that says, "Shaken, baby." No thanks, I tell her, but she keeps knocking down the price, first 100, then 60, and before long it's anything I want for $2. When I told her to take the hike, it was with no satisfaction. It felt ugly, you know, dirty and pathetic in more ways than I can tell watching this sorry horse stagger off the diner because there were no more prospects after I turned it down. I watched her through the lit-up window as she slid into a booth, only one in the place. Tried to see the waitress's face, couldn't see if she felt sorry or just disgusted as she poured the coffee. Watched the small change counted out on the counter. That hooker was pathetic, all right, but she could have been anyone. You just never know what life's going to throw at you. You never know the story behind a lot lizard in a truck stop selling anything you want for a deuce. I was tired outside, ready to hit the sack like you wouldn't believe. The JD started to take effect, but I got out and went over to the truck behind me, a new bulldog. Chrome everywhere and a load of culverts that had to be overweight, probably planning to haul out in the middle of the night to beat the scales. I hammered on the door and there's this big guy, a whole lot bigger than me, pushes the door open. "What do you want?" he asks. And I think maybe this is pretty stupid, but I hooked my thumb in the direction of the truck stop door, light spilling out and the waitress pouring the second cup for the hooker sitting in the booth. "You even thought about it for 10 seconds, you pay up." "What?" "You even thought about it even for 1 second, that's $10. $10 a second. Taking up a collection." I jerked my thumb again at the window behind me. "She needs a meal. He's a doctor. Needs a break anyway." He looks at me, looks at her sitting there in that booth, shakes his head. Pulls out a wallet from his back pocket attached to a chain big enough to hold a Rottweiler. Digs in and pulls out a 20, then digs out some more and pulls out a 10. I'm waiting, looking at the bobbing head of the hula girl on the dash. I take the cash and nod, start to walk away. "Wait," he says, "I'm coming." 2 of us together, we make a good argument. By the time we got to the last rig in the lot, we had $213. My new buddy went back to his rig, grinning, and I slid into the booth opposite the woman, feeling pretty damn good about the whole affair. We were the only 2 in the diner, must have been just about closing time. Well, I looked at her and thought, she may be a lot lizard, a 2-bit whore, nothing no mother would ever want her daughter to be, and looking at this exact moment like something you want to scrape off your boot, but you had to feel sorry for whatever put her there. She's sitting there in that baby blue shirt that says, "Shaken, baby," and she looks at the pile of bills for a full minute before saying anything while I wait, all full of myself, grinning. Changed your mind? I grinned bigger, but tried to speak soft. Nah, it's from the boys out there. Get yourself something to eat, some clothes. See a doctor. She looks at me, looks at the pile of money. Then she spits on it. I thought she'd be grateful, you know. I thought she'd be happy. She spit on that money all smoothed out in little piles of 20s, 10s, 5s, 1s, and stood up to leave. I couldn't believe it. Her face all prideful, she stood there for a second looking at nothing while I looked up, mouth hanging open, thinking, what the? When I looked at the table again, the bills were gone. I looked back up to see the back of her, high heels clicking, head in the air as she tucked the bills into the waistband of her miniskirt. The waitress stood behind the coffee counter, arms crossed, watching. Then she just shook her head and turned back to filling the ketchup bottles from the big jug. Made me think of my mother somehow, and Cass and Myra both, all of them rolled into one, the way she shook her head like that and turned away, like something was so obvious and I was just too dumb to get it. She was offering, I said, but she turned, interrupting. I know what she was offering, and I know how low it likely got, but it's service for payment, you know. It's commerce. That's how it works. Well, she took it, didn't she? Yeah, she did, and she'll spend it too on whatever she wants, never mind what you think she should. But if she could have, she'd have walked out without it. Beats me how a whore can look you in the eye and offer her services for $2 and then spit on you if you offer for $200 for nothing. Beats me where you draw the line when it comes to what's an insult, what's respect. Or maybe it's just that it's easier to ignore what's not in your face. I guess we're all like that, sometime or another. The guy on the bulldog yelled something from his cab when I went by, probably wanted to know what went, so I gave him a thumbs up. I didn't want to talk. Sometimes something happens, you just want to chew on it for a while. The lights in the diner went off. When they did, about 1 million more stars came out. I had a smoke, watched them for a while, till I got dizzy with the number of them all.